Microphones. Nobody heard anything I said, which is all right.
It's okay, okay.
They're on.
Yeah,
has to
yeah,
be
press the
green.
button, it's got to be green.
There we go.
Here we go. I'll say it again. Welcome to the Camden Charter Commission meeting of June 23rd. Everybody's been able to spend some time taking a look at what we have as our current working draft. We'll kind of look at it, looking for a couple of things that we need to make sure we've identified, anything outstanding that we need to have some discussions on. What we won't do, and Lowry made this suggestion earlier, is if you recognize typos or a word that should be TWO instead of TOO or anything like that, let's save that for another time. Lowry's got a list. I can sit down with him and go over them, so we don't need to be copy editing. I'd rather be talking about substance tonight. So if you have anything like that, you can either give me your draft where you've made connections or call me and we can set up a time to go over them. So I thought we would start with making sure we've identified any of those things that we know will stay in sort of working draft mode, where there are things that we know we need direct feedback on, to make sure we are all kind of on the same page as far as that's concerned. And then there are a couple of places where we have some options outlined. That would be sort of the second thing I'd like us to take a look at, and is see if we can decide, 3, not 4, for instance. And then anything else that we even haven't identified or you want to bring up that we need to talk about or make sure we talk about when we start having public input sessions. And then when we've finished with all of that, I'd like us to be able to at least come to a consensus that we are at the place where we can now take this working document for public information sessions. And I'd like to wrap up the meeting with coming up with a subgroup, not all of us, but a smaller group, to work on planning the public meetings and how we want to handle them, and putting together when we might be able to have those meetings. And I think a subcommittee could work on doing that and take that back to everybody else. That might save us some time and it might be more efficient. So number one was what will remain in the final draft form awaiting input from the general public and the select board. I mean, I think that there are one or two sort of substantive things. Does anybody have anything that they believe falls into that category that we're not going to say, yes, this is final? Yeah.
This is bigger than a typo, but smaller than substantive. On page 5.
Page 5.
Item 2.11, item 2, gives the select board the right to establish advisory committees, which we've agreed on.
Right?
They can only discontinue them after a public hearing.
That's what we've got, yeah.
Okay? I think we need to add language that says that he can only appoint them after a public hearing. I mean, that would seem to be,
I don't think they do that now when they appoint people to committees. They don't do them in a public hearing. They do them in a public meeting, but not a public hearing.
they create the committee in a public hearing.
Oh, create,
That's what I'm
not
saying,
appoint.
because if they want to disband the committee because they say, well, we just don't have that need anymore for committee XYZ, they have to have a public hearing to disband the committee. I think if that's the case, then they should also have to have a public hearing if they want to create a committee.
I see what you mean.
Not appoint membership.
Oh,
but-
got it,
but
got
let's
it.
say if they want to appoint a committee for historical homes, for argument's sake. If they're required to have a public hearing to disband the committee, they should be required to have a public hearing to create the committee.
So in other words, they couldn't have, do so in a regular selectmen's meeting. They'd have to have a special meeting to do
Doesn't have
that.
to be a special meeting. A public hearing can be part of a select board
Right, but they'd
meeting.
have to announce it as such.
Yes, and it's got to be
Came
advertised.
up in discussion at that meeting that they'd like to do it, they can't do it until another meeting. Okay.
Yeah, I
Give prior notice.
What's the time frame on publicizing a public meeting? Is it different than a select board meeting, like 30 days as opposed to 2 weeks?
Public hearing is different.
It is
Is it
different.
10
That's what I
days?
thought, yeah.
7 days.
So it's not a difficult hurdle.
I
It'd
think
be
as
between-
long as it's on a selectman's agenda, they publish the agenda ahead of time, and they have public hearings on, liquor licenses and things like that all the time.
Yeah, but those are put in the paper or whatever.
Right.
they're notified.
That's part of it,
So,
so.
yeah. But I just think
Still
to
have
make,
to
to
be.
make it even, to make it balanced, you know.
There are 2 weeks between select board meetings, which means there's the time. We're not hampering them. It just means the notice needs to go out after, in meeting A, select board says, next meeting in 2 weeks, we're going to appoint a higgly-piggly committee, so there'll be a public hearing on it at the next meeting, and that would give them the notice. What do you think, John? You're an ex-SB.
Pardon?
I said you're a former SB member, like Karen and I are.
Which,
The thing is that most of these come up in a general discussion on the board level, and they talk about whatever the item is, and then at some point, they'll make a decision whether to vote to
okay.
put out interest forms to see who might be interested in being part of this group, whatever it may be. And then they have the next meeting, they have their, or whatever, they set for a date for the individuals to get back, usually 2 to 3 weeks. And then they have a meeting and take the, whatever they want, and then they go forward. I don't really think they need a public hearing to announce they're gonna have it, unless it's a controversial topic, and then they may want to anyway. Most of the stuff is just usual business stuff, most of the, you know. I mean, it's not a big deal, it just adds another layer, that's all.
I think it should be equal. If you want to make it that a public hearing is not required to disband the committee, okay. But I think it's silly to require a public hearing to disband one, but not a public hearing to create one.
We didn't,
It's out of tilt.
we didn't use a public hearing, we disbanded them now.
It's right in here, John.
Well, it will be, we will. And I think the reason is because disbanding a committee is more of an event. If you're saying to the committee members, having a public hearing lets the committee members, who may be current committee members, get up and say, this is why we think it should be continued. I mean, that would be the reason for it, but you, Mark, you had your hand up.
Yeah, we have kind of standing committees
Right.
that are there all the time. And how often do we have new committees created?
Well,
When was the last one that was created?
the design team, which was had been part of the Downtown Network Board.
January project.
Tannery Committee, CDAC, what,
Yeah.
10, 12 years ago. So they have, but you know,
There's also a move in the select board to reduce the number of standing committees.
They're working
There's
on
a
that.
sense that we have too many of them. So I'm guessing if we reduce the number of standing committees, that in the future, there will be a need pop up that used to be handled by one of the standing committees, and maybe they need to appoint a new committee that's only expected to be in existence for 6 months or 9 months or something for a specific task, as opposed to be around forever.
Well, I saw the town report, conservation committee, no one on it, it's blank.
They will
That's one of the
resign.
required committees, right?
It's a state required, yeah.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think it's another layer. I can understand why you probably have a hearing to disband something, because, as you said, people might feel, no, we have more work to do, or we still have to talk about it, or there's something on the issue that needs to still be resolved, even though the selectmen might feel it's not. But just to name a committee, you think
Yeah.
people would come to the hearing and say, oh, no, we don't want you to name a
Well,
committee?
people don't come to public hearings anyway.
So why are we saying it's?
Let's be honest.
There you go.
That's not a well-attended event. I'm just saying is that I think it should be equal. If we decide that we don't need a public hearing to disband it, so be it. But
Well-
I think you should have, whatever the treatment is, the treatment should be the same going in as going out.
Do you want to make a motion? Or Nancy, you've been able to hear this discussion, okay?
Mostly not, but I get the gist of it.
Okay, so Lowry is suggesting that if the select board has to have a public hearing to disband a standing committee, it would create better balance if they had a public hearing before they voted to establish it. To have it on both, the same treatment on either end. I mean, the other option is to not require them to have a public hearing to disband it, because they don't have to now.
They don't, right?
So I mean, that's
I
an,
have a comment about that.
pardon?
I have a comment
Good?
about a specific situation and committee. 3 years ago, possibly more, I was appointed to the DOT Route 1 committee.
Okay,
met regularly for maybe a year and a half or so. Then I think sporadically. Then finally, it just didn't meet. And I contacted the town to find out what was going on about the committee. And it hadn't been officially disbanded. I never got any notice about that. It was still just sort of sitting there and never meeting. So I think that might be true for other committees as well, that it gets set up, and that it should be somehow required in the charter that if the select board creates a committee, they need to review every committee at least annually to decide if it still needs to have that standing committee, and if not, take some action or give a reason why they feel it should be disbanded before it is.
So you aren't in disagreement about having a public hearing to discontinue it. You think there should be more in here about a process for them as far as reviewing the advisory committees. I know they're going to do it because it's gone so long since they have. I'm just wondering if there's anything else in their enumeration of their powers.
And one reason that it might be, it's kind of important is because the select board members change. So if there's a committee that's meeting quite a bit and necessary, as when the DOT was ready to do the project, then they meet. And then when it becomes moribund and nothing is going to happen, somebody in the town needs to have responsibility, or the select board, for notifying the committee members about what's going on, what the status is, and particularly because select board members change.
I'm wondering whether we're getting into sort of select board policy versus what is sort of legal. I mean, I could see saying something in here about, another line after the creation advisory committees. From time to time, the select board shall review the efficacy or the pertinence of the committees. I mean, I think that still gives the select board leeway and flexibility, because I think the charter to me is much more sort of more of a legal document. And so I think if you just say, as an advisory thing, from time to time, the select board shall review the efficacy of the town committees, might handle what you're talking about,
They do that,
rather than annually.
and they do that now.
Pardon?
They do that now. They go over the boards.
Necessity
They
for
just
having the committee, and there is a case, now I can see the fact that if then there might be citizens on the committee who think it should still need to be there, and the select board or some reason at the moment might decide no, I can see then the need, having a public hearing to disband it.
Mm-hmm.
I do see that point.
Okay, what are y'all's feelings about adding additional language about making them review it, or a vague from time to time, or the public hearing up front? We could
I'm
move on.
fine with it, just the way it is right now. I don't see any need to add anything else.
Lowry, do you want to make a motion so we have a vote?
Which way are we adding? Public hearing before and after, or just
Well,
public hearing?
we don't have a motion.
No.
We don't have a motion, so if we want to make a decision, you want to have a motion, Lowry, or?
Okay, I'll move that we add language to this section that would require the select board to hold a public hearing before creating an advisory committee.
I'll second that for discussion.
At this point, can we just leave it the way Lowry wants it? We're going to have a public hearing on this whole thing,
Right, couple of informational
Right.
meetings?
and then we can just highlight it and discuss. I'm not all the way there, but I'm willing to,
Well,
let's talk about it.
we can insert it as an optional addition,
Yeah,
and then that would flag it, as well, and I do want to talk about that a little bit. We could flag it in here by saying optional addition is to require a public hearing before the establishment of a committee.
And it's not going to hurt to put some options in there as we go forward anyway, because give the citizens some options.
That's right, to think about and to discuss, because whatever we publicize out there, the copies we put out, we probably ought to have those notations in there about what are options that we haven't decided amongst ourselves that we could finalize. And then, what the pros and cons are even. So, okey doke.
I'll amend my amendment. Amend my motion to include as an option
Okay,
for consideration at public information meetings to require a public hearing on committees the select board wants, advisory committees the select board wants to create.
okay, great. I'll second that.
Okay.
All those in favor of that listed as an option? That's unanimous. Is that 6? Thanks, Lowry. And sort of while we're in the select board, is there anything else in the select board? Jim Hurd had a question, and I told him I'd bring it up. If you go to the last page on this section, which is page 8, section 2.17 is the codification of ordinances in the Camden Code. The last paragraph, paragraph 2, on the third line, it says, at least every 10 years, the code shall be reviewed and updated. Jim Hurd was wondering whether that was actually often enough.
I heard somewhere, I think it was watching one of the select board meetings, that they are looking into, or they've already contracted for, having all of the codification put into a new system, a computer system that will be manageable and updatable and readily available.
And standardized.
Standardized.
Everything will be the same format.
Yes, and so I'm not sure if this is even pertinent at this point in time.
I don't think it's referring to that. I think it's referring to, does the zoning ordinance need to be updated? Does the,
Well, it says at least, and I think that covers it. If it needs to be done
more often?
more often, they can.
The state statute is very vague. The state statute
this
just
is
says from time to time,
Yeah.
which is
Says
means,
at least 10 years.
At least means you can't go beyond 10 years without looking at it again.
I think that may be an excess. I think 5 years might be better, but
I wonder if that will be a
As long as
burden
there's
with everything
something in
going
there.
on.
Well, I wonder if we said, be at least every 5 years, the code shall be reviewed and updated as necessary.
Because at 5 years, they could decide they don't need to.
5 years, they might say, looks fine to us, let's keep on going.
John?
Just gotta be careful, we've already put time limits on the comp plan, the
Charter.
charter. Now this, we gotta make sure that what we do, we stagger, or we're never gonna get people enough to do 3 documents at once. You know what I mean? If necessary.
I think, my mind, taking it down to 5 years may be burdensome because of
Yeah.
what John has said. But I think at least every 10 years or sooner if necessary.
this is talking about going over the codes for the town of Camden.
That's right, which includes like the police
Could-
ordinance.
There be language put in here that it should be maintained and updated on a regular basis by the person in charge of it. Like, I'm going to say the code officer or the, like whatever Jeremy is, the. whatever-
Planning director.
the Planning director. It is their responsibility to keep it updated, regardless of the years, regardless of the time frame. If the state comes out with new codes, why wait 10 years? All the stuff that we had in here
That was so,
that was referenced to codes that didn't exist for 10 years.
I know, that had been repealed.
Yeah, been repealed or reviewed or revamped.
You made an addition to this that kind of covers that for the charter. You were going to say
But
something.
it seems that all new ordinances and other pertinent material, it should be done when it happens. In other words, if we have a town vote on something and we have new ordinances, that should be somehow slipped into the Camden Code right after the vote's taken. We're
Well-
going to wait 10 years to put it in?
No, no, you don't. Actually, paragraph number 1, I think, takes care of that, as does, on the previous page, authentication and recording of ordinances. Ordinances adopted by the voters, all ordinances and resolutions adopted by the voters of the town shall be authenticated and recorded in full in a properly indexed book by the town clerk.
Okay, so what happens at least every 10 years then? If you've
The
already-
the formal code, the big giant book that will, but,
Going to retype the whole book?
well, no, shall be reviewed to be, if it needs to be.
Okay, so we're assuming that no one's making sure that it's being done annually or when it has to be done.
Well, it will be under the new system. I mean, of course, Katrina and Janice, every time they we pass some new zoning, we made some changes to the zoning ordinance in June, and that will go right into the zoning.
So
Printed
then
zoning
what
book.
John says, we won't have enough people to do it. It seems 2 people could do this. You wouldn't need a committee to do something.
No, you don't need a committee
Yeah,
to do
which has
it.
basically been done. So I don't see this particular as a big deal one way or another then.
Right. I agree.
Should we, that's one of my questions was, who reviews this? If
Well,
this-
it's under the select board's
Well, but if-
enumeration of powers and
but
responsibilities,
in
it's
the-
their
in-
section.
Yeah, but when we've got other things we reviewed, we've identified this committee shall have this many people, and they shall do this. If this is supposed to be a staff review,
Well, I think staff is part of the review. The person that's in charge of the code enforcement officer has to participate in this. I would think.
well, and the police chief and anybody else that's got regulations out here. This is not just zoning codes. But my thought is if this is a staff function, then should we say that it's a staff function? That it's not a citizen
It
function?
would be an in-house for the most part.
Should we say the administration?
Yeah, because you're gonna be,
At least
Anybody
every
within.
10 years, or
As
at every
needed.
10,
as needed.
As needed.
or not as needed, because that could be in 15 years, so, or,
Yeah, but if,
well, I know what you're saying. Let's just say at least every 10 years, the code shall be reviewed and updated by the town administration?
Have we defined the town administration
Yeah, it's
somewhere?
another definition.
That's the town manager and staff.
it's the code officer, it's Jeremy, it's
Oh, that's-
or whoever it is. It's Randy from
Yeah, well, we
police.
need to add,
fire
we need to add
department
town
stuff.
administration to the glossary then.
And a citizen can bring it
Up
forward.
there.
The Citizens
Okay, so
Committee
should we say shall be reviewed and updated by the town manager and,
How about by town staff under the direction of the town manager? Then we don't have to define anything new.
Put on direction of the select board. Make-
so this is in the select
Actually,
board
the select
section.
board, 'cause select board doesn't have the right to tell any employees what to do.
No, but they have a right to ask for the
Under,
manager to direct whoever to do a review.
under the direction of the select board, at least every 10 years, the code shall be reviewed and updated. This is in the select board's responsibilities. So I say, under the direction of the select
I'm
board.
good with it. That way.
The code shall be reviewed and updated at least every 10 years. So we reverse that, those phrase.
Code or code
the-
or all codes?
This is all code.
The code the code is all ordinance and resolutions having the force and effect of law. That's what paragraph 1 says.
If they get
That's
that new system in, it's probably gonna be much
Ordinances,
easier.
health
It-
ordinances for
it's-
restaurants, anything.
instant updating.
Right, so
Okay.
things ought to be a lot better.
So we're going to say, under the direction of the select board, the code shall be reviewed and updated at least every 10 years or sooner if necessary?
No, I think the at least every 10
Or
years.
just say
covers
reviewed.
that.
You
I
read
think
that?
it
Okay.
becomes,
Let's say updated or
No,
just
that's-
reviewed every 10 years?
Well,
Because updated means there's something wrong.
Should be updates should be taking place as they take place.
The update is making sure
They will.
everything's been included. You're not changing anything. You're just making sure everything's been included. So
well,
anyone could do
updated, but
that.
they're talking about review, which is the,
Now, if the
Pivotal
state comes
word.
down and passes.
why don't, the only thing that I know that the code says is, I think, is from time to time. And that is section 2636, I think, in the code, municipal code, the state code. 2636, powers and duties. Wait a minute. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Could have sworn I had that written down. Oh, it's MS 3004. Sorry. Oh, don't fail me now. Well, never mind, I'll check it. Because I did 3004 and came up with something.
Most of the time-
Oh, here we are. I was in the wrong title.
Debbie, but most of the time, over the years, if there's been a problem with the zoning ordinance, somebody picked it up along the way with either the planning board or the zoning officer or somebody, correct, or a citizen has been affected by it.
Right, so
And
it's
so-
going to happen before every 10 years anyway.
Right.
Okey-doke. So I think we have it.
Right.
Let's read it once more.
Under the direction of the Select Board, the code shall be reviewed and updated at least every 10 years. So we just reversed those phrases of the original sentence.
Hey, Dad,
Yeah, Nancy?
I think it might be handy to have code in the glossary with the definitions.
Yeah, we can take it, that's a good idea. We can take it right from page 8 here where it's defined.
Yeah, I put it there.
Okay, because it says, oh, it's in number 2, or wherever it was, I saw it. Yeah, it's, codification is a recording of all ordinances and resolutions having the force and effect of law, so we can add that to the glossary.
We've already got codification in the glossary.
Oh, we do? All
It
right.
says the process of collecting or arranging the laws of the town into a code, i.e. into a complete system of positive law.
Okay, let's see. It says the process of collecting or arranging the laws of the town into a code, i.e. into a complete system of positive law. And then we could add, codification includes all ordinances and resolutions. Should that be added? The process of collecting or
Either that
arranging.
and strike arranging the laws, and instead arranging the ordinances,
And resolutions.
resolutions, blah, blah, blah.
Having the force of effective law. Okay, so we'll take that language for codification, the process of collecting or arranging all ordinances and resolutions having the force and effect of law. Perfect.
Are you going to leave the phrase into a code?
Pardon, Nancy?
Are you going to keep the phrase into a code under codification?
Yes.
Okay.
That looks like that's a Bill Kelly phrase, into a complete system of positive law. I'm not sure what negative law is. But should we verify with Bill that whether or not that's supposed to be there?
We can-
That doesn't seem like a phrase that one of us would have come up with.
We can star that and add it to a list of BK things. All right, thanks, guys. So that took care of Jim's thing. The, going through here, I don't know whether, we have, actually, we don't have options on the Budget Committee. That's just something we want feedback on.
Too far ahead here.
Oh, yeah, go ahead,
Well, we're
yes.
still on the select board.
Oh, okay, you got something.
Voting. And at the meeting to vote, correct?
So far, but I think the law, I don't know if the state law is changing.
Well, at present, it still says, because what I'm getting at, the governor has lifted the executive order, so they should be meeting in person soon. So they shouldn't be voting from Zoom from East Paris, whatever, because you can. It should be here at the meeting. It always used to be, you had to be present to vote. I know we're in a technical age now, so I'm
Well,
just curious.
If you're on Zoom, you're considered to be at the meeting.
Well,
But it's-
now
if you have a
because of,
hybrid meeting, what do you do?
well, right, that's what I'm asking, because it doesn't spell out if it's allowed, because right now you're supposed to be present to vote.
Right.
And I believe that there is a movement in the legislature. I thought that they were proposing to allow what we're calling hybrid meetings, where some are voting are voting from,
Well, that's what they're doing now up here.
Up here,
They're getting
exactly.
ready to.
I would say until that happens,
leave it as it is.
leave it as it is, they have to be present. When that happens, we can revisit this.
Yeah, it could be, and actually,
You can make reference to it too, saying when the law allow, if the law legislative changes or whatever.
well, that's actually taken care of by a section that talks about separability in general, in section 9.06. Should any, this is page 26, should any of the provisions of this charter that are governed by the main revised statutes become invalid due to a change in state law after the adoption of this charter, the new main statute shall take precedence over such provision until the charter can be amended.
Okay.
So our base is covered.
So just leave it until we can amend.
Yeah.
So if, and that's one of BK's, Bill Kelly's, supposed to keep us on our toes as far as that's concerned.
One other thing too, I have a pet peeve of, and I don't know if this is the time we talk about it, is their access to cash. I mean, it seems they've got the board. I mean, right now they're running a very high contingency for whatever reason it's there. We're running a very high undesignated balance, surplus. I just want to make sure that it goes through the process that the people have to vote on it to approve some of this stuff.
That would be in section, Article 6, I would
And that's
believe.
fine, I just want
No,
to
if-
make sure we talk about it.
I know that we've got something in there that we talked about in our last meeting in May that I think you've already told me you disagree with, which is the emergency funding. We have a section when we get there in Article 6, 16.09, which is the administration of unexpended balances and fund transfers on page 18, and that's where you would address this. But I believe this is already existing in our current charter, the language that we have there. But I'll make a note here. So you want to talk about 6.09, which is the admin of unexpended.
Well, I mean, they still can move unexpended, what do you call it,
Yep, the
carry
surplus
forwards every
account.
year, that's typical, when usually a
Right.
project is done, you carry the money forward. What I'm talking about is spending money, you can't spend money out of surplus without a town meeting vote. That's not the select board's money. They can spend their contingency because that's part of their deal. I mean, I don't agree with the amount that's in it right now, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. I still think anything that comes out of the surplus needs to be a vote to explain it.
Oh, yeah. Always was, wasn't it?
Supposed to be, anything that comes out of the designated, you can't take any of it out.
Let's see. The only time that they can do it is, and I'm on page 18, see if I'm reading this correctly, vote to transfer an amount not to exceed 10% of the unexpended balances, from any budgetary department.
Within the
To
budget.
another budgetary
Right.
department. Okay, so that's,
As long as you don't exceed the total budget.
2/12, yeah,
But-
2/12.
But you cannot exceed the
see
budget.
the total budget. So
Right.
you're talking about money over the total amount of the budget as approved by the town voters. So that would be, you would be right, because it's the town voters that have the authority, because we're a town meeting form of government, to expend any money beyond what's been in the approved budget.
I also saying that you cannot spend out of surplus, which is, we have an undesignated surplus balance.
Right,
That is a standalone balance.
right.
And that, I'm not talking about transfer,
You're talking about a decision,
to do something and take money out of that account without a town meeting vote. No.
Is the undesignated surplus classified as a budgetary department?
I believe it is.
no.
It's just part of the.
It's just
I
an
mean, part of-
asset.
I'm asking
Not a-
because that's what they've got the right to move around.
It's departmental
that.
money.
No.
They can move it from the police department to the DPW
That's not what,
if
that's
there's a
not what
need to.
John's saying.
Well, that's what my question is if it.
No,
if it's
undesignated
not-
surplus is not part of that.
Okay, so then they
discussion.
don't have the right to move it.
That's why I'm asking, to make sure it's in there.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't specifically say that, but if it's not a department, then they don't have the right to move the money.
There's like $5 million sitting in it right now.
Administration,
It's B.
okay, so we need to,
On the other,
maybe that's a BK question.
on the flip side, if we don't say they don't have the right, there's nothing in there that gives them a right either to do it.
No, but things happen.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying.
Right.
So if you don't say they can't do it, and nothing's, you know what I'm saying, right now they can probably do it because nothing says they can't.
Well, that's what I want to say.
And you
Then
wanna
make sure
change
that it says it
You
takes,
want to make a
It does
change.
say
I
that.
want to make sure it says a town meeting vote to take any money out of surplus.
Okay.
Undesignated surplus. The rest of it's fine. I mean, that's tradition,
agree.
that's normal business.
That is a
Should,
big,
would it be
big
easier if
topic.
we added a new section just entitled undesignated surplus?
I think that's a
And-
good
And
idea.
to say undesignated surplus funds may only be placed into the current annual expenditure program after a duly advertised town meeting and approval.
That sounds good to me.
I don't know if that's the way to word it, but,
Maybe the wording should be changed. but
because
I'm
one year
wondering-
we took the 300,000 out of it to pay the snowball. That was a town meeting vote at the town meeting to pay the debt.
But I'm wondering if we just break it out as a separate section, to kind of highlight the importance of it.
Or do we add it
It's
as number,
necessary to break it out.
do we add it as number 4 to 6.09, administration of unexpended balances on page 18?
There is an emergency
Put it
clause.
there.
There is an emergency.
It's number 4.
I think,
Any expenditures from the town's is surplus account?
all, John?
Isn't it
None.
called the surplus account?
Undesignated surplus balance.
Undesignated
Undesignated surplus
surplus
balance.
account.
The only thing is 611 is something that's gonna throw that.
That's another, that's a whole nother thing.
Okay.
This is for normal operating procedures.
Business
Any
debt.
expenditures from the town's undesignated surplus balance, is that what you guys said? Must be approved by a town meeting vote?
Sounds good to me.
I'm going to make a motion to that effect to include it.
Second.
I think you made the motion, Jean, to include in section 6.09, a new number 4, any expenditures from the town's undesignated surplus balance must be approved by a town meeting vote. That's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
We're
Mark.
talking only non-emergency situations.
Yes, this is to clarify.
611 clarifies the
Clarify.
emergency. Okay.
All those in favor? That is unanimous, 6-0.
Question.
Mark,
What is the status of Bill Kelly as our town attorney? Since
Same.
Since he
everything
left
stayed the
Belfast.
same,
he was reappointed
we're
just the other.
doing it split with Belfast, but where he resigned in Belfast, we maintained him as the town employee.
Town attorney. I don't know the,
Appropriate wording.
From what I understand, it's the same, whatever's been budgeted for this year is what it Bill's salary is.
Okay. So in another year, we'll have to do it on our own as a town, not part of Belfast.
Well,
Belfast was reimbursing.
we were
us.
paying 40% of Belfast's costs.
Okay.
You could ask Audra. I don't know the complete answer to that. Okay, doke. I know we kind of jumped ahead, but John, we got something done, so that's okay.
I didn't mean to, I just,
No, while we
I
were,
don't say what's on my mind, I lose it. It's just gone.
I don't think,
I
I
understand
don't think
that
we have
comment.
anything, I don't think we have anything in any of these categories about options or what we can finalize in town manager, because we've gone over that a number of times and we really just reordered it. We did a complete overhaul on administrative organization by making the whole change of Personnel Board to Personnel Committee. We're not offering any of that as an option. This is our recommendation. So is it okay to go to wastewater department? Jim Hurd had a question, and I asked Jody, and I have to admit, I didn't completely understand Jody's answer, but Jim's question related to, we're on page 12, 5.01, organization and funding. And his question was number 3 on debt service. And I think it says any debt service for capital improvements incurred by the town of Camden on behalf of the wastewater disposal system may be repaid through user service charges. His comment was, well, isn't debt service generally rolled into the cost of the loan or the bond? And maybe somebody like Lowry has more sort of experience with the finance side, might know whether that's true, and wouldn't that capital improvements are generally paid through by,
But
go ahead.
that is included in the budget, and then the budget is divided up for whatever it costs per, I guess, by cubic foot. So whatever, you know what I mean? They're using, I guess what they're doing now, before, all debt service was in tax anticipated, tax notes. Now it's all through the loan, through the users.
So it is all users
It
already?
is now. It is now. They changed it last year, year before.
Okay. It's
And
just-
a lot of reason they changed it because of that FDA loan or whatever it was, they got that agricultural, that part of the deal was, it had to be, this had to be in there, that language.
Okay, so her response was, currently the wastewater department has no bonded debt. Any previous infrastructure improvement bonded debt is paid for in the town's general fund debt service department. Now, for the current wastewater upgrade project, that debt service will fall under the wastewater department, not the town's general fund. All debt payments will be made by the ratepayers, meaning the users. Currently, and until we close on the loan for the current upgrade, she's taken out a bond anticipation note to pay the bills that come in pertaining. The USDA loan will, of course, pay off the bank and blah, blah, blah. So it is done by user services. So I guess he was just wanting clarification that debt service is paid through user service charges, not through taxation.
Now,
Yeah, and we're saying debt service won't, well, it says it may
all the
be.
bonds, it's saying all the bonds are paid for the sewer, up, except for this,
That's what she says. Currently, the wastewater department has no bonded debt. Any
Yeah, that'd be about
previous-
right, because it's been 10 years or more, and we did that, big one with the aerators and stuff.
So I'm not sure that this is an issue.
It is, it allows them to
It
be able
gives
to
them the
go.
flexibility
Right.
to go either
Okay.
way. I mean, as a citizen, mea culpa, I was never aware that they were throwing all of the debt service on the users, which has always struck me as incredibly unfair. That's like only making people with children pay for the schools, you know?
Well, except the users are everybody as opposed to,
They're not everybody.
well, they're not everybody.
Users are only people that use use the sewer. That's the users.
Yes, but that's why we now have two separate bills. You have a water bill and a sewer
I
bill.
understand. I'm not, my argument is if you look at the schools, I think we can all easily say that good quality schools are good for the whole town. They're good for all of us. I don't have any children, will never have any children. I'm content to pay for the schools because I think that's really important for the town. And I kind of view a sewer system as the same way. Because that's good for the whole town. You know, do we have pay toilets so that the users are actually paying for the sewer system? No.
But we also have people in this town that own property that are not connected to the sewer.
I'm not on the sewer.
And they're not paying for the sewer service.
Right.
But yet having public sewer in a town is good for a town,
Right.
because it's healthier and yada, yada, yada. But that barn door is shut.
That's why the debt service is paid by the users.
But
The whole
but I'm
taxpayer.
just telling you philosophically, I'm opposed to
Oh.
that barn, that horse is out of the barn.
It
But I
is.
think going forward, but what this also does is it would give the wastewater department a right to create impact fees. So if somebody wanted to come in and extend sewer to a new subdivision off Cobb Road, for example, which is a village extension thing, they could say, okay, developer, you're allowed to do that. You have to pay an impact fee of XYZ dollars to help defray the costs of the sewer plant.
There's already a formula in there. If the
Yeah.
sewer goes by your property, you pay for the running length of it.
But they'd
and
be
all
able to
that.
charge the developer, so it gives them flexibility, and I think that that's helpful to give them
There
flexibility.
already are some things for that in there.
There is.
But it's still, to me, philosophically, the whole thing doesn't make any sense, you know.
You're not recommending a change?
No.
Okay.
It's well beyond this, yeah.
Anything here.
Well, it's like, should only the people that use the fire department pay for the fire department? No, we all pay for the fire department.
That's
because
definitely,
It's good
that's
for all of us.
public safety, and that benefits everybody.
Yeah.
It's like the dump fees.
I don't know of anything else in the wastewater department. We went over that with Bill, wanting to make it briefer, but he believed it all needed to be in there, those two job descriptions. So now we really are on to 6, which we really sort of reordered it. We made some additions to it with the addition of the endowment funds. But up front, our biggest change is on the budget committee, but we're not proposing options to choose from. We agree that this is what we're recommending.
Yep.
The only thing in here on the next page, is on the bottom of page 16, is town vote on the budget, which is where we currently vote on it in open town meeting. And as you know, the last 2 years, we haven't been able to do that. And we all know that the number of towns, and everybody's seen, we've emailed out how Kennebunk handles it, voting by secret ballot, how Wells does it by secret ballot. And we have on here as something to have a discussion on with the public, because I think we ought to find out how the people who have been voting the last 2 years, how they feel about it, because there are ways of handling it only by secret ballot. And you know, earlier in the spring, there were a number of articles in Portland Press Herald about, is the open town meeting losing its effectiveness because fewer and fewer people are coming, and people thought that the pandemic sort of brought it to a head where all of a sudden towns were sort of forced to go by secret ballot. And there are pros and cons of either one, and I think that's something we could discuss with them. I mean, I'm just saying I want to keep this as something we have as a discussion with the public, because I think the select board also needs to know how the public felt about voting on it by secret ballot. We voted only on a total. Other towns vote on it by budget category, which I think gives the voting public much more say. Mark?
That was one thing that I noticed this year when voting. In past years, we've had selectmen recommend, budget committee recommends. That was not there this year.
That's right.
It was strictly
Or the year
only
before.
the selectmen recommend. And so the general public who did not take the time to view any of the budget process have no idea what was there.
There was a footnote that
Yes.
said there was like $87,000 difference
There was just, that's.
between the select board and the budget committee. The problem is, the 87,000 wasn't the total. There were differences in each budget line, and that's the thing you're not seeing.
Both Kennebunk and Wells require in their charter for both to be published
So don't know.
on the ballot.
Right.
I mean, we do that in open town meeting because you've got both of them. But on the ballot, since they vote by secret ballot, they're required to put both on there. But the one you vote on is the higher of the two amounts. So you can either turn down the higher amount regardless of who recommended it. You can vote for it or turn it down. And the reason is the same reason that you can't go higher when you're in an open town meeting is because if I don't want to show up for the town meeting, I should be able to know the maximum amount my taxes are going to be impacted by whatever the budget is. And that's sort of the same rationale when you vote on it by secret ballot. So we didn't do that. We just voted on a total amount because these are different circumstances. But if we were going to go to a secret ballot, we'd have to do a different job like Kennebec and Wells does.
It would have to be a very different job, because I can say Without question, any time that this has been packed for a town meeting there has been a difference of opinion on the budget items, the dollar amounts.
And a significant,
And it matters. It really matters that
does.
people have a right to stand up and speak their mind.
And say no.
I've seen them move money around after a long discussion, saying, okay, we're going to take 5,000 here, put it over there, and secret ballot eliminates that opportunity for the townspeople to get involved.
that has to happen. We'll see the disadvantage of the secret ballot form of doing it is that has to happen back in April at a public hearing held by the select board, and a couple of towns do it differently. But that opportunity has to happen in April before they set what goes on the ballot. So that moves it, and as Lowry has said in the thing that's, when we've talked about this earlier, that means that you don't have the chance to change it if circumstances change between April and the June ballot. At least in an open town meeting, you can change it, other than perhaps the select board, using their discretionary amount if something happens. But that's something to talk about to get people's point of view, because having seen those articles and people talking about, attendance at town meeting hasn't been that strong. We need to get the public feedback, I think.
But it's certainly a double-edged sword, because you're going to get a better representation of the community down there as far as being able to vote, but you don't have a chance to discuss it.
Yeah, unless you're
That-
here in April and you go to the select board public hearing on it and convince them to make the change. You're right, it's a different way of handling it.
But then you get caught in that thing of, if we go back to a Zoom meeting, how are you going to have that public discussion?
Difficult.
Not going to happen. We had a Zoom meeting for Thanksgiving last year. There were 26 people. 2 people got to talk. I mean, it was a nightmare.
I tried to discuss a budget item earlier at a selectmen's meeting over Zoom, and Bob basically cut me off and said, no, that's not right now on the agenda. Call back, later.
Yeah.
Cards and letters coming in.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, so I'm going to keep this on here, no public discussion necessary. I'm not proposing we put in language, but I know there's good language out there.
I'm not a fan of the public, of the town meeting. I think it's really a dinosaur. But if the select board has the right to move funds from one department to another department, what difference does it make?
But that's only at the end of the year to make sure the
April through
overdrafts
June.
are taken care of, but
Or
but
if,
they can't exceed the amount that was approved by the voters.
I understand
Total
that,
amount.
but generally, the budget changes that are discussed are fairly small, because bigger things have had, like, should we get a new fire truck? That has a lot of conversation ahead of time. It's kind of completely discussed by the time it shows up at town meetings. So these are small things that you could go back to the select board and say, hey, we didn't spend money on this project over here in Public Works, but police could really use that money for this thing they've got going on, and just have the select board move it. I mean, to me, that kind of argues for the secret ballot kind of thing.
Yeah, but I've also seen years when they had a lot of fires and the labor budget for the firefighters was way up here and they didn't have the money to cover it. So we had to dip into, but it was like $60,000 to $80,000 over. Nothing to do about it, you gotta fight the fire, But that was settled at a town meeting. No, that was settled within the select board, moving money within, but,
Nancy, do you have any thoughts? Secret, okay. Well, I think this would be, a lively discussion with whomever comes to the public information meeting. I mean, there are definitely pros and cons. When I talked to the town manager of Kennebunk, they've been doing this for, I think, like 11 years, and they said the reason they went to it was so they had a bigger buy-in from the townspeople on what the budget, approval of the budget. But it shifts the burden from the town voter to show up at an open town meeting and have their say, to the select board to make sure they have a good public hearing system in order to allow the public to come and talk about it.
So there's, in the way I'm looking at it, there's really no difference between having a town meeting and a public hearing. You're asking voters to show up to discuss budget items. What's the difference?
I get, the difference is the timing, and the difference is in the public hearing, it's the select board that's making the vote to what goes on the ballot, you know,
But you're
earlier.
having people show up to discuss it.
It's-
It's not going to make any difference. It's not.
So it's the timing. And how many people show up to actually raise their hand.
That's what I'm talking about, how many people show up.
I think we touched on this a long time ago. Like what happened in Waldeboro about, I don't know, probably 5 years or more, remember? They had a budget decision at the Public Safety Building. I think it was the administrative line did not pass. And then they came back and wanted a open town meeting for that particular part of the budget. Ended up being a huge lawsuit, lawyers, the whole thing. In the end, the courts ruled. So is this covered to allow?
Kennebunk and Wells, if a budget category does not pass, the charter says that whatever the last year's budget was for that budget line is what is used to pay for only those things that are necessary to keep the town government operating, and then the burden is to have another town meeting in order to pass. So the select board has to get back together, put a proposal forward, have another town meeting to vote on that budget line.
So can it be a open town meeting, or can it be
I think it's another secret ballot.
another secret ballot?
Yeah.
That was the argument there.
Yeah, that delays the resolution of the budget by months.
And costs more money
Yeah, the lawyers.
than having an open town meeting to do
Makes
it.
money for lawyers.
I'm just curious if that, because in the end, they did have an open town meeting to resolve whatever the issue was.
Well, I have to be honest, I'm not sure if Kennebeck's language is open town meeting or just town meeting.
Okay.
We had the same thing here in Camden, something to do with the school budget years ago,
Oh, yeah.
where it got voted down, and then we
failed like
wound up
3
at the
years in a
high
row.
school, and it was a big brouhaha. I
It
mean,
failed.
So the people went home and they had a vote afterwards, what happened?
that was,
That's what ended up with
Stunning.
the new high school, which is now 20-plus years ago.
That was way before that.
Yeah, it was before that. It failed like 3 years in a row. And then they finally formed a whole new committee to look into school funding, and here we are 20-some-odd years later, and the legislature supposedly is going to meet their funding goal, supposedly.
Is there,
yeah.
can we keep going on finance? We've added something to section 6.09, and so the next one that we did vote on at the last meeting, I think there were 5 of us, and that's the emergency funding. And this is that the select board, by an affirmative vote of 4, may authorize additional appropriations for the then current operating budget to be funded from either A, unanticipated revenues, or B, the town's undesignated fund balance, surplus. For any emergency affecting public health, safety, or welfare, the sum of all such appropriations in any single fiscal year may not exceed 1 1/2% of the municipal operating budget, exclusive of school and county, for the then current budget year. Any such vote of the select board should be supported by written findings identifying the emergency. And then we say a public hearing shall be held 7 days posted notice prior to said authorization of additional appropriations. So I know that the 5 that were there voted for it. I know that there were 2 absent who disagree with that. But this is, something to be discussed. All of this can be discussed. Yes, go
So
ahead.
you're saying 1.5% of the present budget was like 9 million something this year, wasn't it? The municipal budget? So what's that, $900,000?
100,000,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's $100,000.
$100,000.
$100,000.
And it doesn't come, they can't raise any taxes to do this. This has to come from money we've got.
Yeah, I mean, that's always they have to at the end of the year, they just overexpend lines and then fix it at the end of the year.
What this is doing is saying, in the case of an emergency, like the COVID emergency, they would have the ability to do this. And when I talked to Audra about it, I sat down and talked with her, and she said, anything like this would be the last resort, because the select board does have their contingency fund.
Which normally is 40,000 or less.
Right, and it was built up last year, and all of it wasn't spent, because then along came state money that they were able to use instead of having to use what was put in the budget, just in case there wasn't any state emergency
Right.
money coming. So which is why there was that much more in it.
Right. And then they put another 40 in it this year.
So it was 80 this year?
It was 160 at one time.
Oh, so it's down to 80.
That was built up over several years. It wasn't budgeted within 1 year.
You got 100,000 from last year, 40,000 this year, and then whatever they carried forward from before.
I think it'd be important to hear what other people have to say about this.
But the idea behind that money has always been for the unexpected
Yeah.
problems.
Right.
You know, one year we lost a furnace, that's where the money came out of. To
Right.
pay it was like $27,000 at that, whatever, that year. You know, so that's what it's for.
The undesignated,
No, the select board
the select board's contingency,
contingency is supposed to be for unbudgeted emergencies.
emergencies.
Right,
Right.
but a lot of times it gets spent.
Yeah,
and
but
I'm
this
just
is for
guilty.
completely out of the blue emergencies, like
Yes.
the COVID,
Like COVID.
you know.
Well, COVID certainly, I'm not saying that this is not a good idea. I'm just saying, I just want to make sure I understand it, that's all. I'm fine, I'm good.
And it's like, Deb said, this is the last resort.
Yeah.
If you've got to spend a lot of money very quickly, there's a place to go to get it.
But then again, too, if you had to spend $500,000 or $1 million, I suppose you could throw together a real quick town meeting, get some folks to come in and say, we're doing this for the health of the community, we need to spend it.
How many people showed up in February at the Snow Bowl?
168,
Yeah, a
There
lot.
you go. I mean, so
more
that
than they're
also,
upstairs.
I was going to say, that does show you that the town will turn out when they need to.
And why couldn't we have had a town meeting like that here in June? If we could do it in February, why couldn't we do it
We
in
did
June?
it outside. I mean, why didn't we do a town meeting outside at the Snow Bowl in June?
That's a whole different issue, but
Black flies.
Black flies,
Or
brown-tail moth,
or at the
brown-tail moth
amphitheater.
hares.
While we're on this
That's right.
section,
We're on this section.
a typo. In the middle where it says may not exceed 1 1/2, and then you got the percent sign, it should be, percent should be spelled out, because right after that, they've got the 1.5 with the percent sign.
So while we were there,
Yeah, as
You'll
long as
go
we were
over
here.
all of those
Yeah,
little
but it was- we were-
nitty things.
We were right in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd grab that.
Gene's
one.
catching that, right? Is there anything in the endowment funds and gift management? We don't have any sort of options in there. It's all new. It's been sort of blessed by finance director. So Article 7, growth management and long-range planning, which is all new. We do have this is page 20, section 7.04. Number 2, the review committee. We've talked around this many times, and still have sort of 3 options, and I would really love to narrow that down, because I don't think we need to get into this minutia in a public information meeting necessarily. The review committee, the select board shall appoint a comprehensive plan committee of up to 11 voting members to include all members of the planning board and additional citizens, or just members of the planning board and additional citizens, not giving any number to be specified, leaving it totally up to the select board how many, or we specify in here, the select board shall appoint a comprehensive plan committee of up to 11 voting members to include up to 4 or 3 members of the planning board. I'd like us to narrow this down. I mean, there's 3 different ways you can look at it. Put the number up to 4, put no number, but they have to include the planning board or all planning board members. We've talked about this a number of times.
I just think if we could just make sure we offer it to the public first, and then if you have to fill it with the planning board or whatever like that, I have no problem with that. I just would like to see that first whack goes to the general public. This is supposed to be a people's document, right?
But the planning board is people too. You don't want necessarily all 11 to be, I mean, the planning board lends some experience and institutional memory and knowledge to it. So that's why having planning board members, to me, is essential. I don't want 11, I mean, there's seven planning board, 5 regular.
Plus 2.
And so that would only leave 4 citizens, and that, I'm not interested in that.
Well, we'll throw a monkey wrench in this too, because I remember over the years, things talk about this, of different groups that want to be involved. Sometimes there are people that were expertise in a certain item on the comp plan, but they didn't want to be there for 5 years or 3 years. They wanted to be there for the few months it took to do that particular item. So you got to, how do you allow that in there, showing
Well, they can
call them a
come.
subcommittee part or something like that?
I mean, there were times when you would call the police chief and say, hey, we need you to comment on these
Yeah.
6 paragraphs, what do you think,
I mean, I don't find, let's do 50-50.
But here's a suggestion. Let's
6
give-
planning board, 5.
Let's make it one choice.
Say 4 and 6.
This is like you walk into the candy store, and there's 800 candy bars, you never
Right.
make a selection. We need either nuts or no nuts,
Got it.
Okay? What I would suggest is the select board shall appoint a comprehensive plan committee of up to 11 voting members to include 5 members of the planning board and additional citizens of the town of Camden. So make them have to have 5 members of the planning board.
Less than half.
Yeah, and then you've got a majority of
Citizens.
private citizens.
And if there's a planning board member that says, I choose not to serve, you could fill it
You've
with
got 2
some.
alternates. And the same, my money still says you're never going to get 11 people
But
for any long period of time.
Deb, and that's Karen knows,
Yeah.
all the times we've tried to find people for whatever the committee, they're either ex-select board, ex-planning board, or ex-something, you know what I mean?
Look at this
So-
committee, we lost 3 people after the first meeting,
Well, not quite,
and the
but
4th one like a month after that. It's hard to get people to commit for a long period of time.
which is why we've changed the budget committee size.
Yeah. So that would be my suggestion, one choice.
What are you saying,
And
5?
5, and then there's six.
The town, the select board will appoint 11 members, including 5 planning board members, and the remainder would be
General citizens.
general citizens.
Fine, I'm good.
That's a motion by Lowry.
Motion,
I'll second
yeah,
it.
that is the choice.
Okay.
All those in favor?
There we go.
6-0, great, thank you
Well,
very
I'm mowing
much.
this right down.
Right?
There really isn't anything else that we have in here that we have said this or that. I think those are all of the sort of, other than, people who might find something in the, a section that they want to talk about. But I think those were really the only things we were leaving hanging in the air.
There was one thing I found. Where did it
Oh,
go?
good.
That I thought was very, that I hadn't really thought about. And that's page 27 on the effective date of the page.
Oh,
After adoption, this charter shall become effective for all purposes on or after the first day of the next succeeding municipal year. So if we get what we want, which is to have this approved in the November ballot, that means it's approved in November. It doesn't take effect until, June 7 or something.
oh.
That's a long period of time, and I don't see any reason to do that. Why couldn't we have it take effect the first day of the first month after it's adopted or something like that? Shorten that period of time.
I didn't think of it that way. If you voted on it in June, then
be fine.
July 1st would make sense. So,
50/50 getting it approved in June or November. So let's make it effective the first business
Within
day.
30 days of the vote.
Yeah, no, because then you're giving people choices. The first business day of the first month after the vote.
Fine.
Because otherwise, can we say, well, let's wait until December 12th, for who knows what.
first day of the first
Of the month immediately after the vote.
month after,
After approved.
after
Business day.
So it'd be December 1st or July 1st,
first
basically.
business day,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could be the 2nd or the
After the
3rd.
town meeting.
first month after
After what?
Town meeting.
approval at town meeting.
No,
It's November.
They both call town meeting, June, July.
Yeah.
June,
Yeah,
That's great.
you leave out the word annual, don't say annual town meeting.
That's right. After adoption, this charter shall become effective for all purposes on and after the first business day of the first month after approval at town meeting. Bingo.
And then one other kind of quirky thing is on page 23, section 8.042. Plurality, elections shall be determined by plurality vote, okay? In case of a tie, runoff election of those who tied shall be held within 14 days, blah, 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 blah. We need to rewrite this language because, for instance, if there's two openings in the select board, okay, and the two people with the most votes are tied, under this, they would have to have a runoff election. I would posit that if they tied and everybody else has got fewer votes than them, there's no reason to have a runoff election because they're clearly the winners. But by this, they would have to have a runoff election. So it's a runoff election that really has no.
But traditionally, when they run for a particular seat.
No, they just say
Select
openings.
board.
John, it
Select
just
board, they
says,
run for
it
an
just
open
says,
seat.
And say, if I got down and I had 1 year left, you're running for that 1 year.
No, they're-
That's on.
they would say you were voting for
yeah.
that one-year
But
position.
typically, you're running for 3 years, though.
And so you're saying if there was a 2 year and a 1 year
No,
left?
no. Typically, we've got, because
Two,
there's
one, and
5
two.
select people.
2, 1, and 2.
Yeah, so there's twice, you're going to have two people running, there's 2 vacancies. If there's 4 candidates, 2 people tie with the most number of votes, there's no reason for them to have a runoff. But according to this, they have to have a runoff.
Right.
If they're tied.
But if there's 2 people in 2 positions and they get the exact same number of votes, you don't need a runoff.
Need a runoff.
So there needs to be something in here that says
Yeah,
for
we
each
just-
vacancy.
Just language to tidy it up a little bit, because otherwise,
That's a Bill Kelly.
yeah, it's just, did you see what New York's?
11 candidates?
But what's really weird is because they've got that, the choice voting?
Ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting. So the person who's last, they eliminate them, and they look to see
Right.
what the second place votes were for that person, reassign that. And then they go to the 10th person, and then
Just
they go to
like
the
we
9th
do.
person, they go to the 8th person.
Yeah, that'll take them till July.
Middle of July.
Next year.
What a crazy
yeah,
system.
it's
In
crazy.
case of a tie
That's
for,
my vote. You don't get to move around.
for
We're voting for the people's
Vacancy?
choice.
No, it's my vote. You don't get to move it around.
If you vote for the loser, you
The
get to pick
tie.
the winner.
for a vacancy?
Ridiculous thing.
But if only for one, then what?
Or other
Case of a
maintenance, proud of
tie.
the fact they do that.
Vacancy, you have to have
See
something.
how this
I mean,
budget
if it's
committee
high, it's only
size
one
is gonna
vacancy.
go
You
over.
have 2 people, how do you decide which person's the winner?
You have to have a runoff.
3 people in 2 positions
That's what I'm
Serve.
But if there's 2 vacancies,
People?
and 2 people, and they get the
tie.
exact same.
That's it.
but that's not what this says. What this says is you have to have a runoff, and a runoff is
Called and
unnecessary.
asked and offered to serve last year, and I never got a return call back.
You have to have a year off.
Yeah.
Unless they're, so this, in
right.
case of a tie,
I had only
Look, I
been
can't-
on there for a 2-year
the
term.
tie shall be held within 14 days,
So you 2-year
days on
term.
one notice,
must
unless,
have finished in somebody else's
I took somebody else's place.
unless.
3-year term.
So that's where.
Okay.
That's the number of people that tied with most votes are equal
It's only a
to
3-year term.
or less than the
I'm gonna-
vacancies, the number of vacancies. It's-
Bill Kelly for some language.
But that's
All right.
ironic.
They never returned a phone call.
And
want
did you
to go home
take
and I'll call
Dramamine
you.
while you were reading this on the road?
is when I wasn't driving.
But still, reading this, even as a passenger driving up the highway, I would have needed Dramamine. Is there anything else on this section? So, do we have a consensus that this is, with the few changes we've talked about, the working draft that we would present in public information sessions?
Yes, ma'am.
This is not a vote that we approve, we're 9-0 in favor of everything. This is our working draft to go forward to the public.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Yes, Mark?
We had talked a while ago about meeting with the selectmen to go over it first before we go to the public. And that was kiboshed by the selectmen.
The chairman of the select board, Bob, suggested that they would, well, there were 2 things. Rather wait till we had a more final document, and that Each individual select board basically can have their say in the public sessions. If the select board itself as a body, he was saying the select board itself as a body would not be voting really on this. So I got the impression that there wasn't a,
They have no say.
They have no.
right, and that there wasn't any
They're just
demand for a work session with them.
All right.
That they were
Be nothing more
against
than a
that
courtesy.
strongly, that they wanted to discuss
Be
it.
a courtesy to,
It was.
No, they're no more than the public hearing as a citizen. That's what it is.
We had met with them previously and solicited ideas. Certainly, Deb and I met with Bob
And that didn't
multiple
go anywhere.
occasions.
And I've met with Audra.
When there's things that he felt were really important or we wanted to, and so we've been getting input all along.
What I would like to ask you guys, if, since we're making big changes to the budget committee and big changes to the personnel board, to give them advance copies of their sections, just to let them know, so it, just as a courtesy. And then I will do that.
Give them the
I
whole
don't know, who's the
document.
chair, who's the
Yes.
incoming chairman of the budget committee?
Robin was last year.
Is there a new one?
I don't know.
I don't remember. I don't know.
I think, well, it's one of the things we suggested in here, that the budget committee select their chairman
At the end of the
end
meeting?
of the year for the next year.
They did that before.
Because it was maintained, and a couple of years
You
ago, when I was on the
hearing
committee, the first meeting, whoever had been chair the year before was gone,
Right.
and we had to start with a new.
Well, it happens. I mean.
Yeah,
that's a
it
rule,
does.
you know.
I would
So-
like to see us do one or two press releases about this before we set up the schedule for the public hearing.
Absolutely.
So that people have an understanding of what might be considered, why they might come.
Absolutely, and part of our responsibilities is to get copies of this working draft out there, library, town website, other places through the media, links to how to get it on the town website, and have printed copies available in the town office. And what I'd like to do is to have a subgroup work to figure all of that out, because one of the ideas I think would be important, you know, I did this PowerPoint presentation of the highlights. I really think that what copy we put out there for people to read ought to have this in each section. You know, say, this is new, and have that say, this is new, 6.02 is new. And the one or two lines that we have in here, put it in here so people aren't, and we can use this in a public presentation. But if
What
what
I'm
people are
talking about
looking,
is, on the press release, is because how many people that did not grow up in a small town know what a town charter is? So I'm talking about the real basics, you know, grassroots. This is what a charter is. This is how much responsibility you have in participating in it. We're going to be having a public hearing, and go find these pieces.
that's great. Do you want to do a draft?
I can try.
Well, the other one that you did that we didn't use because that was a long time ago, was really, I mean, you do this. I mean,
I
you've
did
done
the
a lot
town
of,
meeting one that we.
Yeah.
I dropped.
I think there should be a second one highlighting the changes.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, that's what I said, there should be a couple, one just to, you know, get the conversation going, and a second one to make it a little more expansive on what we're
could
talking.
we have 3 or 4 of us work together on planning this? I mean, I would like to be part of it
I can participate some.
based on you know, when we do it, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you could by phone if
Well,
necessary.
I'm going to be here, hope not, yeah.
I mean, well, you're commuting, aren't you still?
Yeah, but that's just 2 days a week.
Okay.
It might be a little bit off track question, but I'm having a lot of difficulty reading the Camden Herald since they changed their format.
Yes.
I bring it up online. and
awful?
it's
It's
really stupid.
horrible.
It's mostly white with no words or pictures or anything. I don't know whether I don't see all the articles or whether it's intended to be that
You
way. or
don't
what's
see all
going
the articles unless you hit news, obituaries, all of those little spaces across the top of the page. So what you're doing is you're paging on paging, paging on
Yeah.
paging, back and forth,
It's-
and it's
It's not nearly as friendly to use as it was before.
It was a fun project for an IT person, but it doesn't work for the general public.
Well, I think we'll get some help, certainly. Susan Mustapich actually contacted me today, wanting to make sure that this would be, out there on YouTube, and I told her that we would if I hit all the buttons right. So I know that she would be happy to come talk to us about how she could even help us publicize, so that's something we could do. So, Jean, Deb, Lowry, as you can. Karen, do you want to participate in a
Sure.
subcommittee to help plan this? Okay. That'd be great, and
And
so I'll contact
I'll get
each,
started on the draft, Gene, for
Great, okay.
publication and get it to you.
I'll email each one of us to get dates for how soon we could
I
get
was going to say,
together.
that's something we should, are we aiming for July? Are we aiming for August?
Well, I think we need to have July and August, because we need to say to the select board, we've had 2 of these sessions, this is what we're,
Why don't we pick some dates then?
Because it needs to be, to get to the select board at the tail end of August, if we want it to be
Big
included
dates
on November's
tonight.
vote.
okay, so let me bring up a calendar.
When do they have to go on the?
And where are we going to hold them, here or in the?
Well, I think we'll
auditorium?
have, I think we'll have them,
June,
I think we'll
yes,
have them in
June or
here. I
November?
mean, the emergency thing is
In
lifted,
November
and
now,
we
if you're
could
going for
pack
this
the
year.
place.
Taking it here or the
When do they
auditorium?
have, the select board have to
I
have
mean,
it? in
yeah,
there?
no,
I think.
Well, they'll be here, either in the Opera House. So for a first, I have to clear this also with, the town calendar.
Is the select board going to in-person, all in-person meetings now?
I've been asking, they haven't said
Because
anything.
the last meeting was a hybrid meeting.
Yeah.
Only Bob was the one in the room, wasn't he, still?
I didn't
Yeah, I
watch,
think Bob
but
was
I
the
know
only
it's
one
still a
here.
hybrid
He's
meeting.
here and everybody else is Zooming.
And that's why it's not on YouTube TV, because no one else is here.
Yeah, you have to,
it's out of
okay,
control.
so
Take the mask off,
if
come
if
meet.
everything were perfect,
It is, ain't it?
I have to say that I am not available the 11th through the 16th of July.
Me either.
So we
Great
could
to
do
be
it that
away.
next, we have the first one that next week,
So the week of the 19th?
shoot for the week of the 19th,
For what, first public hearing?
first public info.
Where? Here?
Well, I would assume here, but I obviously have to clear that with the town.
Large enough space, do you think, or the
Here?
auditorium?
I think it's like 50 people here, what is it?
What's it say up there?
64. This is the maximum for this room.
You're lucky if you get 54.
Yeah.
You might get overrun, you don't know.
Be
But
lucky
then
if
you
get
move it upstairs.
12.
We've done that before, too.
Counting all of us.
During the meeting.
And should we shoot for having one like 2 weeks later?
Yeah, because it has to go on the warrant
Yeah.
sometime in September, doesn't it?
Right, September, late August.
So
early
shoot
September.
for
get it
week
out
of
of here late
August
August.
9th? As number
Better
2?
check with the.
Absolutely.
The calendar for us.
Easier because the select board just says, okay, I mean, they can't modify it. And they
They
can't,
have to vote to put it on because that's their job, but they can't not vote to put it
Yeah.
on. According to state law.
Right.
Okey doke. So I'll email Karen, Jean, and Lowry tomorrow to see when we can have a sub-meeting to do some serious planning. I'll
do an outline of the second story, talking about the highlights of the changes.
Great. Do you want do you have the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah.
You could use this?
Absolutely.
Okay. And what I will do is I'll make a copy of our draft with the changes we've made, and I will then annotate it with this.
Do you have Susan Mustapach's email? Could you shoot it to me? Just send it off to me when you have a minute.
It might be interesting, too, to try to get something on the state news,
On the,
state television news broadcasts, not just local. I mean, not just our local newspapers online and printed, but, Channel 5, Channel,
the Camden's, to maybe balance the negative
5 and 16
publicity
County
about
2 that really
Portland's
cover us.
Charter Commission.
Small on 5 actually lived in Camden many, many years ago.
Okay. So do you all want a second meeting of us, or do you want just by notification what the subgroup is coming up with? Or do you want to plan to have a meeting before the week of 7/19, which would mean the first week in July, first week in
Works for me.
It'll work.
That's next week, yeah.
So we will communicate by email on, particularly if any of these dates have to change, what the specific dates are, and here's the outline of our plan.
Right, unless it's something we need to meet for, we'll just
Okay,
go with it.
all righty. Thank you all very much. Do I have a motion?
I'd like, yes, take a minute and thank you all. You've done great work, a lot of work.
A lot of effort put in.
Thank Deb.
I want to thank you all of you. Done good work.
It's been a big effort.
I think it's been more than any of us thought it was going to be.
Thank you all so very, very much. Did we,
Motion to adjourn?
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Push your buttons.
Turn off.